This is Andy Perot for Boxing Social, and I'm delighted to be joined by one of the voices of boxing, John Rawling. John, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's good to hear. Obviously, we're down here today, and we've had a few announcements that have been thrown out. And we'll start off with the main one, Tyson Fury, and his new deal with BT Sport, ESPN and Top Rank. What are your thoughts on that, and where it will leave the heavyweight landscape?
Well, it puts Tyson in a very strong position, and it's a very powerful alliance. ESPN, who are the major players in the United States, now HBO are no longer part of it. They are the major players from a broadcast perspective. So having an official tie-up between Tyson Fury and ESPN and BT puts him in heavyweight terms very much with a very big power base behind him, and whether or not it means that it's going to be a Deontay Wilder fight immediately, well, that's open to question, and I suspect it might mean now that that's somewhere down the line. But from Tyson Fury's perspective, and for what he can earn and his power base within world boxing, it means very much now that he's not only at the top table, he might be at a level above the others.
The Wilder rematch was something which I was about to come on to. Obviously, Deontay signed up with Al Heyman, and you've got the relationship there with Top Rank that you've got to try and juggle now. How difficult do you think that will be to make the fight? And obviously, if you've got the opportunities, it could go to purse bids, maybe Showtime or DAZN might step in. You know, do you think the fight will happen?
Well, I very much hope so. Excuse me. I think Tyson certainly wants it, and I believe it's the one that the fans want. They definitely want that, and they want to see Tyson in against Anthony Joshua at some stage in the future. Now, whether or not that happens, it's like Game of Thrones, isn't it? You've got the power bases. You've got Eddie Hearn's subscription operation in the United States. You've got Showtime. You've got allied to Al Heyman, and now you've got ESPN with Bob Arum and Frank Warren alongside BT. You know, I mean, you've got some really powerful players there, and it's politically it's difficult. You know, I mean, from the boxing fans' perspective, they listen to this and think, well, what does it all mean? What it does mean is that those fights, as you rightly say, become sometimes very difficult to make politically. There has to be some intense negotiations, and where it all leads, well, we will see. I just hope from a commentator's perspective, and let's not forget as well, you know, I'm not just a commentator and part of the promotion, I'm also a fan. I want these fights to happen. When they will happen, well, we'll see.
Politics in boxing can be very messy at a certain point. This could obviously become one of those situations. How frustrating maybe for yourself as a fan man who also understands the sport a bit more in depth because your involvement can it be when you do see the comments? And I'm sure people will watch this interview or watch other interviews and think, is it an excuse just to not make that fight?
No, it's not an excuse. What Tyson Fury doesn't want, having performed as he did against Deontay Wilder, he doesn't want him in a situation where he's taken for a fool and being at the short end, the big short end of some deal in the United States, which he pretty much has to take, and then be in a fighting situation over there where once again he could get on the wrong end of a dodgy judging decision. He doesn't want to be in that position, and what this deal means today is that from a career perspective he's in a very much stronger place. I think that's the positive. From the fans' perspective, does it mean that Deontay Wilder fight is going to happen next? Well, I'm afraid that the answer to that is quite possibly no. But there'll be a big fight coming up. I think there'll be a big fight probably in May, and then after that, we'll see. I still think that the Deontay Wilder fight will happen because, as far as I'm concerned, that's the biggest fight out there at the moment. I want to see it, the fans want to see it, and I think ultimately it's going to make great business, and that's why it will happen.
Just to stick with the heavyweight scene before we move on to the likes of Joe Saunders and the other guys who are down here today. Last week we saw Anthony Joshua versus Gerald Miller announced. What were your thoughts when that became true and was officially announced?
Well, again, from Anthony's position, he's massive news in the UK. He's not huge news so far in the United States. And when he was last over, Bob Arum said that what Anthony Joshua should be doing is getting over to the United States and building a name over there, whether in New York or Las Vegas. And against Miller, who's, I'm not sure how good a fighter he is, but he's going to talk a good fight, isn't he? And that June showdown at Madison Square Garden, it's going to turn out to be very big indeed. And for Anthony Joshua, it's a chance to enthuse a whole new boxing public over there who maybe have looked at him from afar and thought, yeah, he's doing great things, but he's not really one of ours. Fighting at Madison Square Garden, he has the opportunity to redefine the landscape.
Obviously, the April 13th date was booked for AJ to fight at Wembley, and that's been cancelled now. Dillian Whyte was rumoured to be fighting him. But how sorry do you feel for Dillian that he's obviously built himself back up after that AJ defeat, and he's found himself without a world title fight, or certainly without a big fight, I should say, in the pipeline? Maybe Tyson Fury, an opponent for him in the future? Well,
I think Tyson Fury against Dillian Whyte would be a great fight. That's another one I'd like to see. You know, it's the kind of styles. Well, sometimes you get a styles clash, don't you? And sometimes the styles just mesh. And it might just be that Whyte and Fury made for a very good fight. I know enough about Dillian to know that he'd fancy it, and obviously I know Tyson pretty well, and if he said, you know, Dillian Whyte, he'd be saying, yeah, okay, bring it on, why not? It'd be a tremendous fight. But whether it's a big fight in the United States, well, we'll see.
And to look back to today, we saw Billy Joe Saunders officially announced he's going to step up to super middleweight to fight for their vacant WBO World title. Obviously, it was announced about a month ago now that he was going to fight Demetrius Andrade for the middleweight world title. What are your thoughts on the decision to step up?
Well, he needed the motivation of a world title fight. And at middleweight, it was difficult to get to, wasn't it? There was the Andrade situation, and having not had the chance to fight for or defend his WBO middleweight title, I think that he desperately wants to get the chance to fight at the highest level, and to get straight back in now for a world title fight at Wembley on the 13th is fantastic for him. I think that Billy Joe Saunders is one of the real talents in world boxing. He had a wretched 2018, at times significantly from his own doing. And I think he realises that, you know, that time is running out, and he wants to have a special year. And I hope that 2019 is going to be a great year for him, and he gives us an idea of just how good a fighter he is. Because I think, and I mean, you've watched him enough, you must know, the guy has got tremendous talent, and we just want to see him deliver it in the boxing ring on a consistent basis. We want to see the guy who fought David Lemieux. We want to see that fella in the ring again, because that is a very, very special fighter indeed.
Obviously, Billy Joe is an extremely talented fighter, very slick and moves very well. The power is something which people may question now. Obviously, most of his fights have gone the distance. How do you think he will judge moving up the weight and fighting the higher level fighters at the super middleweight weight?
Well, he wasn't a banger at middleweight, was he? So he's certainly not going to be a banger at super middleweight. But I don't think that's what Billy Joe's about. I mean, he's a throwback type fighter to sort of great craftsmen of years gone by. People like Bomber Graham. He wasn't a great puncher, but he was one of our very best technical fighters. And it's not about just going out there and blasting people. The definition of quality boxing is hit and don't be hit, and that's what exemplifies and defines Billy Joe Saunders. So yeah, I think he can continue to be a huge success at 12 stones.
And on this weekend coming, we see EUBANK versus DeGALE. What are your thoughts on that one? Obviously, a potential matchup for Billy Joe down the line.
It's a great fight on paper, isn't it? I think the James DeGALE of 2 or 3 years ago, I think that James DeGALE would beat Chris EUBANK comfortably. But the question is, which James DeGALE goes to the ring? If it's the guy who fought Caleb Truax for the first time, then I think, you know, that James DeGALE looks like a fighter very much in decline, and he didn't look a lot better in the rematch. And on that basis, I would question whether or not he's going to have the power to keep EUBANK off, and whether he's going to have the mobility to stay away from him. But if he can come back in some sort of shape and maybe just turn the clock back a little bit, then DeGALE would be in with a big shout. But I think on the basis of what we've seen over the last couple of years, James DeGALE is not where he was, and this timing might be right for EUBANK Jr., and he might at last get that big win that he craves.
And to touch on the Leicester show, which has been pushed back a month now, how disappointing that we've had to have that little delay to that show?
Well, it's a shame, isn't it? So the next show is going to be the Royal Albert Hall on the 8th of March, and we're going to be seeing Anthony Yard in action there, and Sam Bowen and Nathan Gorman put back now to March the 23rd in Leicester. Two good shows, I hope. And then following that with April the 13th, Billy Joe Saunders. It's a busy start to the year.
Well, John Rawling, I've kept you for long enough, so thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
You're very welcome.